Welcome. Welcome to CSW66 and our Pathways to Peace event, Child Sexual Abuse, Enough is Enough. Organized by Pathways to Peace representative to the United Nations and my colleague, Marlenis Rosa. I am Tezkiah Gabriel, and I am the Executive Director of Pathways to Peace. We are so honored and delighted to host this event today. Before we begin, I will say a few words about Pathways to Peace. Pathways to Peace is a UN-designated peace messenger organization that holds consultative status with the UN Department of Global Communications, DGC, and the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. For more than 40 years, Pathways to Peace has been engaged in innovation, collaboration, and movement building. Our vision is for a world at peace, and our work is about building a culture of peace. Pathways to Peace provides education, consultation, and mentorship. Working in partnership over the years, Pathways to Peace has inaugurated several UN-recognized global peace initiatives, including the UN International Day of Peace, which is celebrated annually on September 21st, the UN Culture of Peace Resolution and Program of Action, and the Peace Wave. The Peace Wave is a pause at noon in every time zone, creating a wave of folks who are holding a vision of peace around our world. Pathways to Peace works in partnership with peace builders locally and globally, multi-generationally and cross-culturally on programs that build peace and eliminate barriers to peace, including nuclear disarmament, climate change, racial equity, and gender equality. We invite you to join us in our peace building efforts. You can learn more at our website, www.pathwaystopeace.org, all lowercase letters. And so now I am delighted to introduce Marlenis Rosa. Marlenis is a family service specialist for the New Jersey Division of Child Protection and Permanency. She specializes in investigating child abuse and neglect of children and linking them to the appropriate services. Marlenis believes that her purpose is to make a difference in others' lives by creating a ripple effect with everyone she collaborates with. She believes that developing strong relationships is the foundation of everything she does, both professionally and personally. Paramount to her are the women and children she serves passionately in her community. She continues to address issues pertaining to women and children through her many and various roles within her community and beyond, and as a representative of Pathways to Peace at the United Nations. It's my honor and absolute delight to turn the floor over to my colleague and today's event organizer, Marlenis Rosa. Marlenis?
Thank you so much, Tez, for the awesome introduction, and welcome everyone to this awesome event that we have prepared for everyone. Like Tez mentioned, I'm an investigator by nature of child abuse and neglect based out of New Jersey within the United States. I have one of my colleagues present with us that's also going to help me co-present tonight, Maylene Colon. So I'm going to send it over to her for a few words.
Hello, everyone, and welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Like Marlenis said, we are colleagues. Also recently an investigator. I was recently promoted to supervisory in the same department, but we worked together as a great team investigating many difficult cases involving abuse and neglect. And I am happy and honored to be a part of this event this evening and hoping to convey some very important information to you all. Thank you again for being here.
We also have Dr. Medina present with us, who works closely with us on the medical perspective of things. Dr. Medina, if you can just share a few words about yourself.
You are muted, Dr. Medina.
Oh, thank you. So sorry.
It
Yes.
happens.
Yes. Thank you for having me again. My name is Dr. Medina, and I work at St. Peter's University Hospital together with other additional child abuse pediatricians and nurse practitioners who have been working very long time in this field, specifically in New Jersey, but also collaborative throughout the entire United States in providing a very much needed medical care for kids that have been victimized by child sexual abuse. So it is my pleasure to be here today to share some insights and take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Medina. So to start off, I just want to share a disclaimer. Because the topic is child sexual abuse, it is a very difficult topic for us to discuss. There might be some graphic stories that are shared or graphic information that is shared or even language that we use. We do want to share that if anyone needs to take a minute to step away from the screen, either turn off the screen or just step away from the conversation, that's completely okay. It's important for each and every one of us to take care of ourselves, especially during these times. And over to you, Tez.
Tez, you're muted.
Thank you. Yes, it happens. Thank you, Marlenis, for putting in front of us the Pathways to Peace wheel. You will find our Peace wheel on our Pathways to Peace website, again, pathwaystopeace.org, and I will put that in the chat for you as well. As I said earlier, every year around our world, hundreds of millions of people come together on September 21st, the International Day of Peace, to celebrate peace. The International Day of Peace is a time to set aside differences and to envision a world at peace. At Pathways to Peace, we know that a world at peace and creating a world at peace requires more than one day a year. So we need to bring intention to our everyday activities and interactions. So you'll find on our website several interconnected tools to help all of us make Peace Day every day. One is our Vision for Peace, which you'll find on our Peace card, our Peace Wave, and this Peace Wheel. So we use the Peace Wheel in a number of ways to help us create peace education for a specific sector, to ensure an inclusive approach to peace organizing, to lift up peace activities in each of those sectors or segments, and most of all, to recognize the role that each of us can play in our everyday lives to bring peace to our planet. So each of the segments or sections that you see on the Peace Wheel represent a segment of people in our planetary community. Each segment represents a sphere of influence and interaction. Each segment has a history and people who are taking actions to advance peace. You may identify yourself in one or more of these segments. For example, You may be a government employee and a volunteer in an environmental organization. So you have influence and interactions in both of those groups. Pathways to Peace recognizes and supports you as a peace builder, as we know that each of us brings peace to our world through living peace in our lives. Simply by anchoring peace in our hearts, our light shines out and it touches and changes everything. The peace wheel reminds us that whatever our background, culture, or experience, we are a peace builder. And it is through those everyday actions and interactions that peace becomes a lived reality. So thank you, Marlenis, for reminding us about the peace wheel and how we might use that in our own activities to bring peace through our interactions in our spheres of influence, as well as recognizing that each of us is a pathway to peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Tez, so much for sharing that with us. So we're gonna jump right into the topic at hand. Maylene's gonna tell us a little bit about the Child Advocacy Center, which is where we worked out of, and how we incorporate Dr. Medina as well.
Thank you, Marlenis. So the Child Advocacy Center, usually referred to as either CAC or CAC, is the center, like she said, that we work out of. So for us in the county that we actually work in, it's a satellite office because we work for the Department of Children and Families, right? But this satellite office that we work in is very convenient because we're actually stationed out of the Child Advocacy Center. At this center, it's a very convenient location where families, it's almost like a one-stop shop. So in this center, we have the investigators from Child Protective Services. On another level, we have the prosecutors, we have the detectives in the Special Victims Unit, and on the first floor, we usually have a SANE nurse, and we have additional support staff that assist everyone at the Child Advocacy Center. The purpose of these centers is to kind of minimize the amount of trauma, right? The additional trauma, rather, that the child victim has to deal with. These children obviously have been a victim of some sort of trauma, and the purpose of these centers is to kind of minimize this trauma to some degree. For example, when the child comes in to give just an interview, right? It's called the forensic statement. Marlenis and I are privy to sit in the monitor room. So we observe the child give a disclosure to the detective, and at which point it makes it easier for the child because we don't have to re-interview the child. We don't have to put the child through those. And perfect, this is what the Child Advocacy Center looks like. We don't have to put the child through the interview process again, you know, where they have to relive these horror stories and these moments. So it kind of minimizes that trauma. The location itself is very home-like, right? So when they enter, they have the waiting area set up like a living room. There's a television, there's numerous amounts of toys. We usually have an abundance of snacks on hand for the children. That way, you know, they have something to eat if they're coming right after school, or just to make them comfortable. The picture to where the desks are, that's our little office where we're stationed on the 3rd floor. It's a little open space. There are about 5 investigators that work in that unit. The middle photo with the 2 chairs is actually where the assigned detective conducts the forensic interview with the child victim. And the purpose is to make sure that it's a comfortable setting, right? You want to engage the child victim as best as possible and provide for an environment where they're going to be willing to, you know, speak comfortably. The top right photo, it's the actual monitor room. So those are the screens where we actually are able to observe the interviews. And the dolls that are in the photo are various dolls that are utilized whenever the child victim is asked to give some sort of an example, right? Be it an example of what the perpetrator may look like, or if they're asked to demonstrate a particular incident. So these dolls come in various of various backgrounds and ethnicities to kind of make it as relatable as possible for the child victim. And the bottom photo on the bottom right is the Child Advocacy Center from the outside. So it does look like a home. It is welcoming in comparison to other locations. And so that is where we conduct our day-to-day business every single day. And we see, sadly, victim after victim come in through those doors and, you know, give their story. But the great thing about the Child Advocacy Center is that we all work together as a team. We all work great together. And we really have the best interest of the child victim and the families at hand. So we do whatever it's necessary to ensure that we make the experience as comfortable as possible given the circumstances. So with that being said, this is, you know, the Child Advocacy Center, and that is the purpose of the multidisciplinary team.
Thank you, Marlene. We're gonna go into discussing a couple of statistics for child sexual abuse victims. So every 73 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. Every 9 minutes, that victim is a child. And as many as 93% of victims under the age of 18 know their abuser. As we'll discuss later on in the presentation, unfortunately, oftentimes the perpetrator, as we call them, or the abusers, is someone either close to the family or someone that the child knows. And only 5 out of every 1,000 perpetrators will end up in prison. The chart on the right over here by Rain, it says that out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 975 perpetrators will walk free. So if you take a look at the breakdown, you know, it's very difficult for victims to share that they've been abused for a plethora of reasons, you know, but, you know, looking at that, only 310, let's say, are reported to the police. And out of those 310, 50 reports lead to arrest. And it kind of just slims down from there. 28 out of those 50 cases will lead to a felony conviction, and only 25 of those perpetrators will be incarcerated, which is a very minimal number in comparison to, you know, all the acts of sexual abuse that's taking place. Marlene?
Oh, there we go. Thank you. So child sexual abuse is the involvement of a child in sexual activity that he or she does not fully comprehend, is unable to give informed consent to, or for which the child is not developmentally prepared and cannot give consent, or that violates the laws or social taboos of society. There are many forms of sexual abuse. Sexual abuse isn't just the normal or the average form of sexual abuse that I am going to speak for myself, that you grow up just learning about. Someone was just either touched, you know, or someone was sexually, you know, assaulted, where the abuse involved penetration. There's so many variants of sexual abuse. And the problem with this is that many a times these child victims are not even aware that they're actually victims or that they are being abused. So these abusers actually find different ways of abusing the victim. Some of these abuse, you know, they start off with the fondling, right? A little touching here, a little touching there. And usually what we call that, it's they're grooming the child victim, right? They're grooming the child victim to see how much it is that they're able to get away with, so that it kind of escalates little by little, right? If the child victim doesn't say anything once the fondling commences, then the abuser is usually like, hey, let me see what else I can get away with. And that's usually how things escalate. And eventually it leads to some sort of penetration. We have had many investigations where there's just masturbation in the presence of a minor, right? So the abuser, in the abuser's mind, they might feel that, oh, well, I technically didn't do anything wrong because I didn't touch the victim per se or had sex with the victim, but they're actually masturbating in the presence of a child. We've seen many forms of grooming that commence via text messages. In this day and age, many children are privy to cell phone and social media and things of the sort. So it usually starts here with phone calls, text messages, and things of that nature, just to see how far, because the abuser starts by pushing boundaries. You push a little here, you push a little there, and you see how far it is they can actually get away with. And like I said, these child victims, a lot of times they don't realize that they are actually a victim, right? So they allow these things to continue to occur and to escalate to no fault of their own. It's just that they don't know, they're not aware of what's actually transpiring. We've also seen situations for instance, in which some teenagers run away from home. We know that that's common. It's something that unfortunately happens. It's been happening forever. This day and age, teens in particular get upset. They run away. At these times when these teenagers end up running away, we often see that they are actually sexually abused by someone, right? Someone that they know. And when the teenager decides that they don't want to return home at times, this leads to the sex trafficking. At this time, the abuser decides that they want to traffic the victim in exchange for drugs, money, or anything else from another individual. This is how many of the victims end up getting trafficked, and a lot of them never see the light of day, right? They get lost in this trafficking system per se, and no one is ever to see from them. So things, sometimes it's just regular sexual abuse, regular in that it's just a one-time incident or something that occurs over time, or sometimes it's to the extreme where they're actually trafficked and they're sold to other perpetrators in exchange for something else that's going to benefit the abuser and obviously not the traffickee. We have to bear in mind that whether it's the fondling, right, or whether it leads to an extreme of being trafficked, all sex abuse is harmful to a child's mental, emotional, and physical well-being. We've seen children shut down. We've seen children become depressed. We've seen children and these victims end up institutionalized, for psychiatric care because of the effect that the child sexual abuse has had on them. And we see the emotional impact that it has on them. They end up with this rage where they pretty much hate the world, they hate everyone, and they feel lost. So it does have a huge impact on them. So it's not, child sexual abuse is not only a physical violation, it's a violation of the child altogether, whether it's physically, mentally, and or emotionally. So we say all this to say that we should keep an open mind that child sexual abuse just isn't limited to the touching that we usually hear of, or the sexual assault. It just involves so much more. And in a lot of cases, I can speak for myself and Marlenis, we've investigated a lot of situations wherein not only is the sexual abuse that includes penetration, vaginal, oral, or anal. A lot of times these abusers feel, well, if it's oral or if it's anal, I'm really not doing anything to take the child's, virginity. These are just the taboo, the ignorant mindset that a lot of these abusers tend to have. So they feel that if the abuse is just oral or anal, it wasn't vaginal, it's okay. We've seen that. Sexual abuse is sexual abuse, no matter the form. And that's something that we want to make sure that, it's clearly conveyed to everyone, because oftentimes it's kind of separated. People just think that if it's not solely vaginal, it's not, penetration or sex, they're not being sexually abused. And it's not the case. So, these are just some forms of the child sexual abuse that we have investigated and that we see on a day-to-day basis. Marlenis?
Thank you, Maylene. I'm going to share a video with everyone. Just give me a second to switch over. Okay, just give me a second. We're having some technical difficulties.
When someone listens to you and makes you feel special, how could you suspect that they have something else in mind? When I felt lonely, he was there for me.
Whoa, you scared the hell out of me. I told her that
When I couldn't talk to my parents, I could talk to him.
She didn't ask, so.
When I felt worthless, he made me feel appreciated. He understood me. So when should I have seen it coming? I babysat my niece and nephew during the week. Being at their house was like a vacation from mine. And Steve, well, Uncle Steve, was like my adult best friend.
Mary's got the kids. Let's go for a drive.
He'd take me out so I could talk about my school stress, or my issues with friends, or my fights with my family. And he'd find a way to make me laugh.
Hey, when your mom acts like a lawyer, you can plead the fifth. It'll hold up in court, trust me.
Besides the babysitting money, sometimes there'd be a gift. Should that have made me cautious? Whoa, I wanted this exact one.
Yeah, I saw you post about it online.
I remember when he asked me if I was dating anybody yet,
Well, why not?
because guys don't look at me.
Oh, guys, look. A cute girl with curves gets all the attention.
He talked about sex a lot, and my body.
Show them what they want to see.
It was weird, but he made me feel more confident in myself. And so I told myself it was normal to talk about things like that with someone who's close. And for them to touch you in ways that, well, don't feel totally right, but you're not sure that they're wrong. And for them to make normal situations feel uncomfortable. When I realized that my relationship with my uncle wasn't normal, I thought it was too late.
Why don't we go down to the beach? Have some fun.
My mom's expecting me home.
We don't have to be long.
She'd noticed. She'd blow up again. We just stopped fighting.
Aw, you're no fun.
It's so easy to spot when it's happening to someone else. All the teasing and sex talk and gifts and touching. I didn't want to get him in trouble. I just wanted things to be normal again. But I didn't think it could be normal anymore because I'd let it go on for so long. I thought it was my fault. I spent months thinking I would keep it a secret forever, but I couldn't hide from my uncle. So I stopped babysitting my cousins and answering his calls. But our families lived so close. Was I just going to pretend everything was normal during the holidays? So I did the only thing I could think of. Mom, could we talk?
Yeah, honey, sure.
Now I understand that abuse can come from anyone, even a close relative. Sure, my uncle showed me affection, gave me gifts, and allowed me to confide in him. But lots of relatives do that stuff, and it's totally fine. So when did it go too far? The moment I felt uncomfortable. Pay attention to how others make you feel. When you realize something's wrong, that's when you have to say no and do whatever you can to be safe. Don't get caught up thinking about what might happen if you tell someone. You have to do what's best for you. Sometimes that means getting help from an adult you trust. Listen, no matter what the circumstance or how long it's been happening, it's never too late to stop it.
So like the video was mentioning, a lot of times, and like we mentioned earlier today, oftentimes that abuse comes from a person that we know, that the victim knows or is familiar with, and many times it's a family member. So discussing what a perpetrator looks like, it's not easy to say, you know, a perpetrator is A, B, and C, because a perpetrator can be a sibling, an uncle, a caregiver, a teacher. But like I mentioned earlier, it's often someone that the victim knows. A perpetrator doesn't always have to be an adult in order for them to harm the child. And oftentimes the perpetrator likes to create games, or they call them games, to the child victim. And that's part of the grooming process, as we saw in the video, where he would buy her gifts. He tried to share interests with her and tried to isolate her and take her away from the setting that she was in to groom her and continue the abuse. Many times abusers can manipulate victims to stay quiet about the abuse using different tactics. They often show expressions of love and attention, which, you know, often is seen when a child doesn't necessarily get that love and affection from a parent or a caregiver. So, you know, sometimes these perpetrators, you know, look for these victims and create their entryway to start abusing them. Oftentimes, the perpetrators like to create the idea of secrets for the victims and kind of create that connection where, like, this is our little secret. No one else has to know. Don't tell your parents anything because they wouldn't understand why I love you like this. And also a perpetrator can be a parent or a step parent. I know for myself, I had a case, Marlenis is also aware, a couple, I guess, maybe a year or two ago. It was a 17-year-old victim when I got the case, who the division or our agency was aware of the idea that something might have been happening with her, or that she might have been being abused by her biological father. To make a very long story short, initially the agency received a referral about the child, stating that there was suspicions that she was being abused by the father. When we went out and investigated, the child at the time, I believe she was 15 or 16, denied that any of the abuse was going on. And it's very difficult as an investigator and even as a detective on the other side for us to, you know, say that something happened if a child doesn't admit to it. So this child initially during the first referral denied that anything happened to her by her father. On top of that, she had two younger siblings and a twin brother that she felt that she needed to protect. You know, the agency that Marlene and I work for oftentimes gets the connotation that we're going to remove children and we're going to place them in foster care. I'm not saying that we don't do that, but we only do that if it rises to the level of a child being put at risk. So the 17-year-old didn't want to share that she was being abused by her father because she felt like if she did say something, she would get her father in trouble, and she would get her siblings removed, and they would no longer be a family. Fast forward to when I got the second referral for the family. Initially, there was suspicions that the 17-year-old was pregnant by the father. When I went out and spoke to her, again, she denied that anything happened with the father, that she was sexually active with him, and that she was pregnant. Again, very hard for us to say that something happened when the victim themselves is denying that anything happened. Maybe 3 to 4 weeks after we received the case, we had set her up for evaluations at the Child Protection Center where Dr. Medina works. And unfortunately, 3 to 4 weeks after we received the referral, the father had taken her and her twin brother back to Haiti, where the family originally is from. While the 17-year-old is in Haiti with her mother, she decides that she finally wants to disclose about the sexual abuse. And at that point, she also discloses that she's pregnant by the father, and she's pretty far along. In Haiti, if a child decides that they want to get an abortion, which is what this child wanted to do at the time, they will end up in jail as well as their parents. So, you know, the child wanting to not have her own father's child decided that she wanted to get that abortion and that she couldn't continue with the carrying the child inside of her. So, you know, luckily we were able to assist the mother who was living in Haiti to bring her and the twin brother back to the United States so that we could assist in getting some justice for her and assisting her with getting the abortion, because that's what she wanted for herself. Upon her arriving back to the United States, we were able to do that. And in interviewing her and getting another follow-up statement from her, she basically disclosed everything that happened with the father. She had mentioned that the father had actually impregnated her years ago. I believe she was maybe 13 years old when it first happened, and he had her have an at-home medical abortion. To the point, and this might be very graphic, but to the point where he gave her some pills to take so that she would have the abortion. And as she was aborting the child and kind of the procedure ended, he gave her a shoebox and said, here's a shoebox, pick that up, put it in there and put it underneath the sink. You know, thinking about her and trying to put myself in her shoes, I can't even imagine what that must have felt like, knowing that your own father did this to you and that you were holding what could have been your child. And then fast forward to the time of the last referral that we received and having to have another abortion on top of that because your father had done it again. So, you know, this is just an example of what a perpetrator looks like. It could be a father, it could be a mother, a step-parent, a caregiver, basically anyone that's close to the child. And the overall goal of our presentation tonight is just to create that awareness that, you know, it's our moral responsibility to do something about it, to kind of look for the warning signs, or maybe even share the information that we learned today with others that might not be familiar with it, so we could hopefully help at least one child in need.
So, sorry. Hi. So to piggyback, you know, off of what she said, the goal here is to definitely create awareness, right? And many a times the child victims are not ready to disclose, right? So oftentimes others ask, well, why did they wait so long? Or why this? Or, you know, if it was me, I would have said something. You know, we can't ever explain why a child victim, you know, discloses when they do, or why at times the abuse occurs for the amount of time that it does. Each child is going to disclose whenever they are ready to disclose. And that can come through a direct disclosure, that can come from them disclosing to a friend who eventually tells an adult, and so on and so forth. So with us trying to create this awareness, and in light of children not coming forth and disclosing immediately that something transpired, these are some of the warning signs, some of the things that we've seen, some of the things that are known as warning signs that we ask others to just bear in mind. You know, just keep certain things in mind, that when something of either physical signs or behavioral signs occur, these might be warning signs, and this might be an indicator that this is where you as the adult, right? Because the children rely on us. So you as the adult, you know, should take that opportunity to kind of address any concerns and just try to find out if something is actually going on. Some of the physical signs that we've seen are, you know, bleeding, you know, a lot of vaginal bleeding at times, bruising, right? There could be bruises from just being just rough. So bruises on the body, bruises around the genital area, swelling in the genital area, like it's noted there. we've seen many times where there's a lot of bloody and or torn or stained undergarments. And sometimes these children are so afraid that they're not going to put that in the hamper in the laundry basket, where they know that mom, dad, or someone else is going to do laundry and see this. So they hide it. So I've had investigations where the children are infamous for hiding it either in between mattresses or underneath the bed in hopes that no one is going to see that. But because they end up leaving it there for quite some time, and because they're hiding it, when the disclosure does come about and the detectives, are conducting their investigation and they're looking for forensic, like physical evidence, they usually find this at the home, and it's taken into custody for evidence purposes. Many a times, depending on the type of the abuse, how brutal, how rough, if any objects were utilized, the child victim may have difficulty walking or even sitting. Frequent urinary tracts or yeast infections, especially for a child of a particular age where that isn't or shouldn't be too common. We've seen it. We've seen children have STDs at such an early age unnecessarily because they were abused, so they'll complain of the pain or the itching or there's burning in the genital area, but they'll just complain that it's just that. Many times they don't say from the very beginning that this is why this is happening. This is why I feel like this, such and such did this to me. So these are just some of the physical signs. I mean, there's many more physical signs, but these are some of the ones that actually stand out the most to bear in mind, if ever seen. And again, the goal is to create awareness with regards to behavioral science. There's changes in hygiene. I remember 6 years ago or so, I had a case where the child victim was being sexually abused by her stepfather. And it had been going on for so long. And as much as she told him to stop or asked for him to stop, he was just brazen. Like one of the incidents occurred at the parking lot in a McDonald's, and it was caught on surveillance, after the fact, after she disclosed and evidence was obtained. And after she repeatedly asked him to stop the abuse and he failed, to do so, there were changes in her hygiene. So she figured, if I stop bathing, if I stop putting on deodorant, combing my hair, taking care of myself, maybe I will disgust him to some degree and he might become repulsed and he might not want anything to do with me. Sadly, in that situation, as much as the hygiene changed, it didn't stop him. And in fact, what happened was we ended up receiving concerns from the school because they were concerned of the change in the child's hygiene. There's instances where certain phobias are developed. There's another, going back to Marlenis, when she indicated that abusers, we can't indicate what they or portray what they exactly look like. But in situations where it is the biological father, there was this teenager who had been raped by her biological father at the age of about 11 years old. Until this day, vividly, she recalls everything, the way that it happened. And she always says that she recalls that every time that he stepped into the bedroom to remove his belt, she recalls always hearing the sound of the belt buckle. But more so, when he would get on top of her, she would smell the alcohol in his mouth, specifically beer. He was an alcoholic. He was a heavy beer drinker. And so she's developed a phobia to the smell of beer. She can't stomach the smell of beer to this day. And it's sad, but these are some of the things that, some of the signs, to kind of look out for. A lot of the nightmares and bedwetting. A lot of children experience the bedwetting. The teenager that I just mentioned with her father, she had a younger brother and she was extremely overprotective over her brother. She would never allow her brother to be just alone with the father in fear that he too would be abused by the father. So she was always concerned, and she always said, I'd rather him continue to abuse me than to touch my brother. So at times they put themselves in that predicament, right, where they're like, I'd rather just continue to be abused than have my sibling endure and go through what it is that I've been dealing with for X amount of time. Sometimes children, the victims, are threatened by any physical contact. They are afraid when someone, gets too close, or they don't want to be hugged. They just do not feel comfortable at all for the reasons that I just stated, and because they are traumatized. That is definitely due to the trauma that they've endured and that they've experienced. many of the children, the child victims, express suicidal ideation. They engage in self-harming, right? Because especially when they don't disclose and they feel like they're withholding all of this information, their only outlet is to kind of self-harm, and they end up self-harming, hoping to feel better. And what happens is that they end up, getting psychiatrically screened, and many times they're admitted, for until they're psychiatrically cleared, or they end up, receiving inpatient treatment because of these ideations, because of this self-harm that they're engaging in, because they just haven't disclosed, or even when they have disclosed, sometimes they don't feel supported. They feel like, they're in trouble, or they did something wrong, or someone's out to get them. So these are just some of the behavioral signs. Again, there's many more. Just like there are with the physical signs, but these are some of the ones that stand out to us the most. So we just ask that we bear these, keep these in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Maylene. At this point, we want to give everyone about a 30-second break. The topic, I know, is a very tough one to digest and often hear about. So if you guys just want to stand up for 30 seconds, I'll start the clock. And just kind of like roll your shoulders back and forward, and do a couple of stretches to kind of regroup as we come back to the next topic of conversation. We have about 15 seconds or so. And we'll get started in 5 more seconds. Again, I want to thank everyone for being present today and wanting to learn more about child sexual abuse. So moving on to the next topic at hand, we've learned about, we learned an overview about what child sexual abuse is, what to look for in terms of the warning signs, physically and behaviorally, and also what a perpetrator might look like. And we've heard some of the stories shared about some real life cases that both Maylene and myself have experienced during our career. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do to protect a child from sexual abuse. As I mentioned earlier, I feel like maybe because it's part of my passion and I've been doing it for so long, it's a moral responsibility to do everything that we can to keep these things from happening, whether it's educating a child about appropriate body parts, educating a child about the fact that they have a right to say something and that someone will believe them. Oftentimes these victims keep these things to themselves because they feel like they're ashamed and they feel guilt and they feel like they can't speak to anyone about it. It's often hard for individuals to have a normal conversation about, body parts. A vagina, for example, I know maybe because of the field that I'm in, I can freely say vagina, but I know a lot of times people don't necessarily say vagina and penis, So just kind of discussing those appropriate body parts is a big way towards protecting a child from abuse. Like it says, there's no foolproof way on how to protect a child, but there are steps that we can take to reduce the risk of it. So, if something ever happens to a child in your life, we have to remember part of our moral responsibility is that it's never the child's fault and they're never to blame. The only person that's to blame here is the perpetrator, because they're the ones that are doing the wrong. They're the ones that are, taking something from a precious, innocent child. It's important to become involved in a child's life and show interest in their day-to-day lives. If you're not a parent or you're not in the parental role, maybe you have a niece or a nephew you can have these conversations with. Or let's say your kids have, your friends have kids, you can have these conversations with them. Or even, depending on where you are career-wise, it's important to just have these conversations and break that taboo of we can't talk about this because that's not allowed. That's not what I was taught. It's not proper etiquette to have these conversations. Like some of the warning signs that Maylene mentioned, it's important to know those and to know what to look for. And again, just encouraging a child to speak up and to let them know that they won't get in trouble. Having that open line of communication and really allowing a child to know that they have a voice can go a long way. And just being able to give them your undivided attention. You know, oftentimes, because we live in such a digital world currently, we become distracted by our phones or our computers or work or day-to-day lives. But, you know, if a child knows or feels that they are listened to and that they'll be believed, they're more likely to open up. And it's also important to ask open-ended questions, not just yes and no questions. For example, you know, instead of saying, have you ever been touched? Maybe you can say, do you know who you can speak to about, or what you can say to someone to express what you've been through, things like that. And then that kind of leads me to speak about some good books that are geared towards kids, so that they can have these conversations. I'll leave these up here, and if anyone wants to like take a screenshot of it or a picture, I know that I have a couple of these books because I have younger kids at home, so I'm constantly having these conversations with them, because it's important to know that, you know, consent, it's a two-way street. It's not just one person gets to decide because they're older, and things like that. And again, some secrets should never be kept. This is one of those examples where we should never keep secrets about this topic, especially. I have another video, so just bear with me so I can switch over.
These women all have one thing in common. Each is a survivor of child sexual abuse. They were asked 5 questions, and they agreed to be open and honest about their personal life. Raise your hand if you have suffered from insomnia. Raise your hand if you have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder. Raise your hand if you have been addicted to alcohol or drugs. Raise your hand if you have struggled with an eating disorder. Finally, raise your hand if you have attempted suicide. Many survivors deal with significant impacts of their abuse well into adulthood. It's not a coincidence.
So we'll talk a little bit more about some of the effects of child sexual abuse that can be seen later on in life.
Hi. So some of the effects of child sexual abuse, like we just saw, they vary, right? You can't say that child sexual abuse is only going to have solely one effect on the person. It varies from person to person. Some individuals sadly have multiple effects due to the child abuse. Some don't experience as many, but nonetheless, everyone experiences one effect or another from child sexual abuse. Some of these effects include depression, which is very common. We see that way too often, especially in younger children. They become withdrawn, they shut down, they become very depressed. And early on, they end up being prescribed psychotropic medications to help them cope with this depression. Many victims experience guilt, shame, and self-blame, especially when the child victim doesn't know any better or even comprehends what it is that's transpiring, they end up feeling self-blame, right? So it's my fault that this happened. Maybe I should have said something, or maybe this happened because I did this. You know, they just start to make up excuses and things of the sort to kind of justify what transpired. And as Marlenis said earlier on, what we all need to keep in mind and remember always is that the only person to blame is the abuser, right? The perpetrator. We're not to blame the child. We're not to blame, you know, anyone but the person responsible for abusing. Many of the side effects includes the stress and the anxiety that again, you know, can lead to having to take medication, to psychiatric treatment, to inpatient treatment to deal with those stressors, including the body the disorders, you know, where they develop certain eating disorders, bulimia and things of that extent. Many a times these children, these victims rather, engage in drug use, right? It's an escape. It kind of helps them block out what's going on. And oftentimes they think that by engaging in this drug activity, it's going to help them to forget what happened. And we all know that it doesn't. It blocks it for a moment. The memories and the impact is still there. But it happens, just like we saw in the video. Many people fall to the drugs, and we've seen this especially in the cases involving a lot of the child victims that have been trafficked. They not only are they trafficked and subject to the enduring the sexual abuse, they're also you know, they become drug involved, and then they start using substances and they become addicted. So there are many effects, you know, whether the drug abuse, you know, comes later on to help them cope with the trauma, or whether it's something that they're subjected to at the time or around the time of the abuse. These child victims a lot of times don't sleep, right? They don't sleep, they stay up at night. This actually, you know, it has an impact on them. When they're in school, they can't focus, they're exhausted. So it's almost like a domino effect. You know, one thing happens and it starts to affect everything else. And, you know, like we mentioned before with the suicidal attempts, we've seen that a lot. And it's just, it's disheartening to see that and how often it happens. And it's a lot of times it's the child victims go to, right? Because they feel trapped, or they feel like they need that escape, and they don't know if they're going to be believed, or they don't know what to expect. Sometimes even after they disclose and, you know, the law enforcement is involved, we're involved, and everyone else is involved, you know, as a team to try to help with the matter, it becomes very overwhelming for them, and they don't want to do it, and they just want to shut down and make it go away per se. And we know that that can't happen. And we've seen at times where, you know, they engage in suicidal attempts. And you know, we end up working together as a team with the family to ensure that they are provided with the services that they need, whether it be mental health services, medical services, and things of the sort, because we ultimately want to ensure their, you know, their well-being and their health, despite whatever it is that has transpired. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlenis. You know, I think oftentimes I know for speaking for myself, the proper etiquette is that silence is golden, but I want everyone that's present here today to kind of, if you take anything away from this event tonight, let it be that silence isn't golden. It's lonely, because, you know, the victims oftentimes feel abandoned, isolated, forsaken, alone, removed, unwanted. Even though they might get a little bit more attention, this is one of those things where one of those taboos that we kind of have to break through. You know, there's this sense of a child victim feeling like they deserve this, that they asked for this, or, you know, it's their fault that maybe they quote unquote attracted this person to do these things to them, when that's not the case at all. And again, you know, as we said time and time again during this event so far, it's always the perpetrator's fault. And a lot of what Marlenis and I have seen with the perpetrators is often that, you know, they do this, they participate in sexual abuse, maybe because they've been through their own traumatic experience or some sort of trauma that led them to abuse someone else. So again, if you take anything away from this, silence is not golden. It's actually very lonely. And this is why we all have to be the voice for these kids. And if not, encourage them to share their voice and continue along the journey.
Sorry about that. So with everything going on, once a disclosure is made and we look to provide the family with the services that are required, right? Because this isn't, let's put a Band-Aid on the situation. Okay, you disclosed, great, we wish you the best, put a Band-Aid on it and just continue with life. No, the purpose of the matter being investigated is to seek justice, make sure that, the abuser, that there is justice, to make sure that we provide the support that the family needs. This tends, a lot of times when the disclosure comes about, this is the first time that the family has experienced this. They don't know what to do. They're confused, they're lost, they're angry. There's just a host of emotions. And our job, Marlenis and I as investigators, is to make sure that we help the family with the process. And we assure them that our duty is to make sure that we get the child their needs met, right? So we always want to seek a medical evaluation and a mental health care. So we work extremely close with Dr. Medina, who's extremely instrumental in what we do on a day-to-day basis, and her team over there at St. Peter's at the Dorothy B. Hirsch Child Protection Center. And the purpose of the medical evaluation is to, make sure we reassure the families that the purpose of the medical evaluation is to make sure that the child is physically safe. And, Dr. Medina, I'll tap into that. That's her area, but we make sure that that's what we do. We send them for the medical eval. We make sure that they get their mental health care, to ensure that there's no ideations, or if there are, that the proper recommendations are made. We reassert the sense of safety, that the child has lost because of what has transpired. So what we do is we make the family, we make them feel safe, and we let them know that we're here to work as a team and to help them to get through these circumstances together. And we try to set a daily routine for the child, right? So we try to get some sense of normalcy back into their lives. And I know it's easier said than done. But, we try to find that routine, whether it's school, engaging in sports, spending time with family and friends, things like that, to help them process the trauma that they have endured, while everything else is being implemented in place to make sure that this child can kind of come back to that sense of their good reality, right? And not what they had experienced that led them to the circumstances. It's so key for children, for these child victims to have a strong family support system. Sadly, we have experienced instances where the child isn't believed by, for example, the mom, if the father is being accused, or the family just feels like the child is making it up, or they're looking for attention. We've seen that. It's heartbreaking, but we've seen it. And at that point, it complicates it for the child, and it does make the child struggle with the healing process. But our job is to make sure that we provide that support. And like Marlenis said earlier on, the agency, is usually, this is taboo that we just go out there and remove children from families. And it's done when it rises to that level, right? When we have to ensure the safety of the child. And when that can't happen, then that's when we step in. And if there's a situation in which a parent, for example, is not willing to protect their child or support them, if the other parent is being accused of the sexual abuse, then that is a situation where we as an agency would step in and provide that support and those resources for the child and specifically. But if the family is supportive, obviously we're there to support everyone as a whole and to get them through this. So not only would we provide services for the child, but at times these parents also require therapy, to get through everything and to process everything, and we do that as well. Thank you.
Dr. Medina, if you can come on and kind of share a little bit about what you do
Yeah.
and walk us through the process at the Child Protection Center.
Absolutely. So the state of New Jersey is very unique among the states in the United States because we have set up centers called regional diagnostics and treatment centers, where there's a group of professional disciplines that include medical and mental health that partner with the Child Protective Services agencies in this state to divide the state into regions, and so that the investigators working on this very difficult cases can have access to a center that will provide the mental health services that are sought out for the children, as well as medical evaluations. In terms of the medicals, we are a group of pediatricians that have a subspecialty in child abuse pediatrics. So we are a bit more prepared than your regular physicians in the community, local emergency rooms, etc., dealing with children, specifically in the subject matter that we're discussing today, sexual abuse, physical abuse also, and neglect. We have very specialized training in conducting the medical evaluation in a way that is not threatening to the child. We are very familiar with anatomy, what is normal, what can be expected, what would be outside of normal. A lot of times, given our pediatric background, we're very comfortable talking to children of all ages because of their different developmental needs, and because children are used to receiving medical care throughout childhood. They know what a doctor does. They actually might feel more comfortable coming to a medical setting like this so that they can share exactly what has been bothering them, questions that they may have about their bodies. Even some prepubertal children who are not even capable of becoming pregnant, they have that worry that they may be pregnant because they were touched in an area that wasn't supposed to be touched. So there is a lot of anxiety sometimes, a lot of questions that children may not share specifically with their primary caregivers or even family because they feel a little bit uncomfortable, weird. They don't want anybody to know what's happening. And so in a neutral setting, like a pediatrician, a pediatric office, they might know that, yes, a doctor is there to help me. So I'm going to now say and ask anything that's on my mind. And that is actually very, very therapeutic for the children when we do address their questions. In addition to that, we explain what the medical evaluation is, what the physical exam is. Many of them want to know that their bodies are okay. Some of them may feel that they are not normal, that they're going to be perceived by others as, ooh, something happened to you, that they may not have regular relationships later on because somebody's going to know that they have been touched or abused. So all of that can be laid to rest with a physical examination, because the fact is that the majority of the cases of child sexual abuse by a caregiver who has very easy access to the child does not have trauma in terms of physical findings. So they don't know that their body's okay, and it's very reassuring when they do know that their bodies are healthy and that they're normal and that it's something that they know happened, but that nobody else would ever know just by looking at them, etc. When there is trauma, also we provide this very comforting setting so that we can evaluate them and follow them if necessary. We conduct infection screening. In addition to that, we have the opportunity to explain a little bit about the mental health process, how that is going to help them in terms of their emotional well-being. We address their functioning in school, with their peers, even at home, and how we can improve that. The benefits of therapy are described, and then when they have their mental health evaluations, that's very, they have a little background and they don't feel as uncomfortable. In addition to that, the medical evaluation is very important and significant for parents. Many parents don't know how to interact with the child after a disclosure is made. Should I bring it up? Should I not bring it up? Should I talk to them? Should I act different? How do I communicate? We try to answer all those questions during a medical evaluation as well. The visits can take from an hour to an hour and a half, but it's an opportunity for both parents and children to address their personal questions. Initially, they're involved in the investigation. There's a lot of repetition of what happened, where did it happen, a lot of detail. Here it's all about, okay, what can I answer for you? Any questions, we're not drilling them in terms of what happened, but anything that they bring up, both parents and child spontaneously, we address. And it's something that they're doing freely, willingly, and they feel just so much better after they leave here. Sometimes we provide direction as to what to do. Also, don't forget that many of the parents that accompany these children, they themselves have their own history of adverse childhood experiences, and they need themselves, they've never gotten help for that. And this is an opportunity not only to provide the services or recommend services for the kids, but also a family component of therapy so that the parents are better equipped to handle that daily routine post-disclosure with their child. Sometimes they have to become physically healthy themselves in order to be able to provide that care. So that's a little bit of what we do.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Medina. So kind of looking and thinking about a lot of the topics that we discussed, you know, it's hard to say enough is enough without actually doing the legwork to get there. So some of the things that we can do to kind of help eradicate child sexual abuse and to kind of put an end to that horrible thing that happens is, you know, we can continue to educate ourselves and educate others on how they can reduce the risk factors. We can start early by having the difficult conversations with children at a very young age. I currently have a 4 and 5-year-old, and I think with my son who's 5, I probably started at 9 months just having those conversations with him, like, you know, this is your penis, no one can touch you there. And, you know, from just repeating it so much, it gets to the point where I start to say something and, you know, they finish my sentences. Like I'll call my daughter's name and she's like, I know, Mom, it's my vagina. No one can touch me. Like, and if they do, I'll tell you, kind of thing. So you want to continue to have those conversations with them so that it's more of a normalized things as opposed to a taboo topic of discussion. We want to continue to teach children that they have rights. And that their body belongs to them and no one else. If they ever feel uncomfortable with something that's said to them or done to them, they should speak up about it. There's tons of support prevention programs out there and agencies like ours where, you know, you can just make that phone call if you have any suspicions and hopefully prevent a child from being abused. It's also important to get involved in the community by attending marches and different organization events that are out there. It's important to continue to know the signs and to continue to educate yourself on new findings. You know, I think over the last couple of years, we've learned a lot more about, you know, human trafficking, which can start off from abuse, from child sexual abuse. So it's important to continue to educate yourself, especially as times change and with technology and you know, media, how things constantly change and evolve, to continue to learn about that. Again, if you have any suspicions, report the abuse. Worst case scenario, it's not true. Best case scenario, you know, you help someone get through it. And, you know, just kind of in wrapping up, prevention through education is the key. Dr. Medina, I just wanted to see, is there anything that you or any piece of advice that you would give on how we can continue to eradicate child sexual abuse from the medical perspective?
So from the medical community, we actually have a lot of advocacy efforts with our own pediatricians, educating the parents right at every wellness exam, how to communicate with their children, and also educating their children as we do the physical examination, what body parts are should not be touched, personal space, safety. So I would say getting the medical community involved and educating peers, especially in the emergency rooms and other locations, this is a step ahead because we are always dealing with the parents, and the home. So that is an outreach. We also go to schools and provide this education to children, whether elementary, middle school, and high school, and have those talks as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Medina. So in conclusion, I have one last video to share with everyone, and then we'll do a brief Q&A from that point.
Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. She means everything to me. I think about her in every decision I make.
Love you.
Hey, love you. Have a great day.
Bye. Have a good day. I love watching my kids grow up, and I want to keep them safe.
Good morning, Dad.
Good morning. Put your seatbelt on.
I know, Dad.
Child sexual abuse prevention is just another safety topic. We need to talk to our kids more about it.
Unfortunately, child sexual abuse is real, and it happens way more than we'd like to think. Research shows that regularly talking with your kids about it is one of the most effective ways to prevent it. But how do you do it? When is the right time?
If someone kissed you and you didn't want it, what would you say?
No, thank you, and I would just walk away.
Find simple moments throughout your day to have these talks.
We don't let anybody show you pictures of private body parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Once you start, make it part of your routine and keep talking with your children as they grow.
Listen, if anyone does anything to make you feel uncomfortable, it's all right to let us know, okay?
Okay. Thanks,
All right.
Dad.
Have a great game.
See ya.
Every parent needs to have this talk.
It's never too early to start.
And it's easier than you think.
Visit the site, download the how-to guide, and start the conversation today.
Awesome. So if there's any questions, feel free to either put them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and Marlene, myself, and Dr. Medina can answer them as we go along.
I know, if I can interrupt for a moment, I know that there was a question earlier about self-care. With the kind of work that you're doing, what do you do to take care of yourselves so that you can keep on keeping on?
I know that in the chat, I said that one of the things that we do, I said Marlenis and I have a great bond, right? So we do support one another endlessly. We do dinner often, or we'll have, she'll take her time, I'll take my time, because ultimately we each need our me day, right? To decompress from everything. So that's pretty much self-care. We have great support systems, so that always helps. But I think that for me, that works best.
Yes, same here. Collaboration with your colleagues, decompression, talking about cases, and then doing fun things outside of work. Enjoying time with family, always knowing that, we're doing great work and there are very good outcomes. So yes, some of the cases can be absolutely atrocious, but the kids are there and we're there to help them. So
I agree. Like I mentioned earlier, I have 2 young kids, so I usually have like dance parties on a Tuesday night randomly. So that kind of helps me de-stress and it helps me move a little bit. So that definitely helps.
That's great. And there's a great story in the chat that from Elvia. I started with my daughter maybe at 5 or 6, telling her that no one could touch her body, neither a family member or a teacher or friend, because her body is hers. Now she is 10, and of course whoops, I'm losing my place in the chat. Now she is 10, and a friend talked to her about her friend being touched, and her daughter helped that friend to speak up. So her friend talked with her mother and a teacher, and thanks to God, the mother reacted properly, and now the girl is having treatment. My 10-year-old daughter is a heroine. Yes, she is.
Absolutely, that's beautiful.
Any other questions, thoughts, comments? There was a question that I think, Marlene, you addressed about language and language translation or interpretation.
Yes.
And then
We're good. No, I just explained that if we don't know a language, we'll utilize a language line, and we usually give a disclaimer to say that, you know, what the topic is, and if they're not comfortable translating for us, then we'll get another interpreter, but we conduct the investigation still.
Right. And there was a follow-up around, are the interpreters trained to handle these difficult situations?
So I think that's where, like, it's important to ask the questions with the interpreters, you know, discussing maybe not so much the matter at hand, but saying, you know, this is a matter of involving child sexual abuse. If it's something that's going to be triggering or you don't feel comfortable with, we'll find a different interpreter.
Yes. So Marilyn says, terrific job with quite a difficult and misunderstood topic. Thank you. I was clueless when I worked with kids in the most challenging conditions in Oakland. Bless you. Lots of kudos to presenters. Beautiful story. Thank you. Brings me to tears.
Thank you. If there's any other questions as we move along, definitely feel free to put those in the chat. We're going to move on to a little meditative phase. If you can lead us in that, Tez, please.
I'd absolutely love to do that, Marlenis. Thank you. So I think what's important is that many of us on this call even have experienced childhood sexual abuse. It's very common. And I want to say it's never too late to tell someone trusted, because it does affect us into our adulthood. And so I just want to reiterate the messages that our presenters have given us, that, that we can tell someone we trust, and we can recover and heal from childhood trauma. So because this is a difficult topic, Marlenis asked me if I would do a little meditation for us, for our own kind of self-healing, our own self-care. And so I'd like you to just settle into your chairs and allow the chair to hold you. Just relax, kind of feel all of your body resting, folding in, to a comfortable position. And I'd like you to slow your breathing. And if it helps you to count, 5 counts on the inhale and 5 counts on the exhale. And you can't do it wrong. So let's just breathe together. And perhaps we want to breathe in world, breathe out peace. This is from my friend Jennifer Kim at the Peace School. Breathe in world, breathe out peace. As we just allow our bodies to relax as we breathe together. One breath. And when we're ready, let's just focus our attention on the center of our chest, where the heart resides. And imagine ourselves breathing in and out through that space, that heart space. You can't do it wrong, so just relax into it. And with every breath, just feel your heart expanding, growing bigger and bigger with that love, that nurturance, that sense of peace. Allow that heart energy to just fill our entire bodies, nurturing and loving every cell as we move that heart energy into and through our bodies. And with every breath, and that heart energy gets bigger, bigger, expanding. With every breath, we feel more loved, more supported, more powerful, more nurtured. And when that heart energy gets so big that our bodies can't contain it, then allow it to go out from our bodies and into our world, loving and nurturing everything it touches. That beautiful heart energy that lifts and unifies us with everything that is, that was, and is forevermore. And as we see our energy touching all the living things and the planet herself, we recognize the power we have to heal ourselves, to heal our planet, to heal each other, that beautiful co-creative heart energy. And we feel that one heartbeat beating together with the planet Earth and throughout our universe. Powerful. We feel our oneness with all that is. Resting in the knowledge of the one heart, the one breath, and the one with all. And feeling whole and powerful and loved beyond measure. We come back into this space and time. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for bringing yourselves, bringing your energy into this event. And knowing that we are not powerless, we are powerful, and we can take action to make a difference. So in closing, I just want to give a special thank you to you, Marlenis, and our speakers today, Maylene and Dr. Medina. Your words are powerful, they're motivating, and we are grateful. And thank you to our participants. We want you to know that your work and your voice matters. At Pathways to Peace, we also want you to know that wherever you are and wherever your heart leads you, whatever your background or your work in the world, you are a pathway to peace. We hope these presentations today have inspired you to make a commitment and take action on behalf of children and families. And we look forward to joining your efforts in building a world in peace. Thank you.